Continuation of Chapter 11. The Church's Past Discredited. This is somewhat the spirit of John Paul II. I do not know what he will say at Geneva, but I am afraid that he is going to make more declarations similar to the ones he made in Germany, begging pardon of the Protestants for what the Catholics may have done to them. Some deem that these are words spoken only out of courtesy. No, it is extremely grave because it discredits the Church's entire past, as well as all the popes who preceded him, and who, according to him, did not know how to do what needed to be done. The Church did not know how to exercise her ministry as she ought to have done. A very grave responsibility is incurred for holding forth such language. And this ties in perfectly with what Pope St. Pius X was saying about what the Sillon taught its members, namely, quote, "After 19 centuries, she has not been able to build up in this world a society on true foundations. She has not understood the social notions of authority, liberty, equality, fraternity, etc." End quote. Presently, the progressives no longer use such language concerning politics, but much more serious concerning the apostolate. Quote, "The Church has not known how to bring solutions to the social questions. The Church has not known how to solve the problems of the apostolate." End quote. The Pope concludes his remarks on the lack of discipline by saying, quote, "The breath of the revolution has passed this way." End quote. The breath of the revolution. Without a doubt, it can be said that the breath of the revolution passed by Vatican II. It is absolutely certain, and for those who were there, as I myself was, it was really palpable. I would go so far as to say that one physically felt the revolutionary breath blow against the past, against all that the Church had done, and against tradition. These were really atrocious times, the self-destruction and self-criticism of the Church. This was especially felt during the interventions. Each time that the Church was ridiculed, or a traditional cardinal, be it Cardinal Ottaviani or another, or the Roman Curia, all the young bishops applauded. Essentially, they demonstrated against papal authority. They did not express this clearly, of course, but in their interventions against the Roman Curia, Roman authoritarianism, certain cardinals, or whatever, these bishops indirectly attacked the Pope. For ultimately, who is in charge of the Roman Curia, and who commands, or who established it if not the Pope? In the back of the basilica, there were hundreds of young bishops who would applaud. As for me, I was among the ranks of the old archbishops, having been such for some time. At that time I was ranked 64th among the archbishops. There were the cardinals, then the archbishops, then the multitude of bishops. Among the young bishops there were rousing ovations each time something was said against the Church. It was truly frightful. Truly the revolution had entered the Church. Revolutionary minds wanted to overthrow everything, to topple the edifice, so to speak. And this is indeed what they succeeded in doing. It was appalling then, and indeed it is manifest now that they broke everything. Already Pope St. Pius X said, quote, "The breath of the revolution has passed this way, and we can conclude that Whilst the social doctrines of the Sillon are erroneous, its spirit is dangerous and its education disastrous." End quote. After considering the formation of the Sillon's members, the Pope takes up the topic of their action, in particular their insubordination vis-à-vis the bishops. What is the relation of the Sillon to the Church? Quote, "But then, what are we to think of its action in the Church? What are we to think of a movement so punctilious in its brand of Catholicism that, unless you embrace its cause, you would almost be regarded as an internal enemy of the Church, and you would understand nothing of the gospel and of Jesus Christ?" End quote. If we place these allegations in the current situation, we observe that the bishops and all the progressives tell us exactly the same thing, that we understand nothing about the gospel of our Lord. According to them, it is we who do not understand the gospel of our Lord. Saint Pius X's judgment of the Sillon. Quote, "We deem it necessary to insist on that point because it is precisely its Catholic ardor which has secured for the Sillon, until quite recently, valuable encouragements and the support of distinguished persons. Well now, judging the words and deeds, we feel compelled to say that in this action, as well as in its doctrine, the Sillon does not give satisfaction to the Church." End quote. The Pope does not declare formally that the Sillon is heretical, but that it does not give satisfaction to the Church. And further on, he adds that it is no longer Catholic. But it would have been something else to actually qualify it as heretical. And on this point, I would like to caution those who have a tendency to decry as a heretic anyone who says the least thing that may not be completely in accordance with the faith. Beware, do not go faster than the popes themselves. St. Pius X only says that, quote, "the spirit of the Sillon does not give satisfaction to the Church." In the same way, when he says that modernism is the synthesis of all the heresies, he does not add that all those favorable to modernism are heretics. He only says that it is the synthesis of all the heresies in its doctrine. If they professed this doctrine pertinaciously and openly, then it could be said that they are heretics. But how many are there who profess a modernist or Sionist doctrine, and yet who are not totally in accord with these ideas? It is necessary to be careful and to be nuanced in our appreciations, as the popes were, as St. Pius X was. Catholicism not linked to any form of government. The Pope formulates two criticisms about the Sillon in its relation to the Church. Firstly, it subjects its religion to a political party, and secondly, it tries to unite all the religions. Firstly, it subjects its religion to a political party. Quote, "Its brand of Catholicism accepts only the democratic form of government, which it considers the most favorable to the Church, and, so to speak, identifies it with her. The Sillon therefore subjects its religion to a political party. We do not have to demonstrate here that the advent of universal democracy is of no concern to the action of the Church in the world. We have already recalled that the Church has always left to the nations the care of giving themselves the form of government which they think most suited to their needs. What we wish to affirm once again after our predecessor is that it is an error and a danger to bind down Catholicism by principle to a particular form of government. This error and this danger are all the greater when religion is associated with a kind of democracy whose doctrines are false." End quote. He specifies a democracy based upon false principles, because it cannot be maintained that all democracies are based on a false principle. As the Pope says, if, for example, the people merely designate the holders of authority, but without giving it to them, the Church does not condemn such a system. Such is the case of Switzerland, for example, which has long been democratic, where the people designate the subjects of authority. What is false, and what the Sionists maintained, was that the authority remains in the people, and that it is conferred by the people and not by God. Moreover, the absolute egalitarianism and exaggerated liberty the Sionists professed are false principles, which they wanted the Church to espouse, as well as to be linked to this kind of democracy. Against such false conceptions of democracy, which the Sionists dreamed of establishing, and which violated the Church's principles, Pope St. Pius X rose up. The Sillon stood back while the Church was despoiled. And after expressing this principled opposition, he clearly states the reasons for his assessment. Quote, "For the sake of a particular political form, the Sillon compromises the Church. It sows divisions among Catholics, snatches away young people and even priests and seminarians from purely Catholic action, and is wasting away as a dead loss part of the living forces of the nation." End quote. While they should have defended the Church and come to her aid when she was attacked in France from all sides, they stood back with their arms crossed. It must be remembered that this was the period during his pontificate when Pope Pius X had witnessed the separation of Church and State in France, and the persecution of the Church that was unleashed by Émile Combes, resulting in the forced seizure of all the church buildings, the despoliation of the Church's property, etc. It would have been necessary for the Sillon, for example, to come to the aid of the Church in order to defend her against the State's open attack. But they did no such thing, as the Pope describes. Quote, "At the sight of the violences thus done to the Church, we are often grieved to see the Sionists folding their arms, except when it is to their advantage to defend her. We see them dictate or maintain a program which nowhere and in no degree can be called Catholic. Yet this does not prevent the same men, when fully engaged in political strife and spurred by a provocation, from publicly proclaiming their faith. What are we to say except that there are two different men in the Sionist, the individual who is Catholic, and the Sionist, the man of action who is neutral?" End quote. This is proof again of the trait that characterizes liberalism, duplicity, two modes of being, as we have seen on several occasions. Cardinal Biot defined liberalism as such. The liberal Catholic always finds himself in a state of incoherence. He is a walking contradiction. Even the very expression liberal Catholic suffices to manifest the contradiction, for if one is a Catholic, one cannot be a liberal in the sense of liberalism as condemned by the popes. The two things are fundamentally contradictory. The expression liberal Catholic is an oxymoron, and Pope Paul VI was the living demonstration.